Gavin has a mission to help business leaders communicate more efficiently face to face. He graduated as a chemist, starting his working life marketing solvents in Southampton. He moved on to selling drugs legally for a pharma company. Gavin has spent the last 13 years as a trainer and mentor, focusing on sales, influencing and presentation skills. His strapline is learning laughter and light bulb moments. Please welcome Gavin Meikle.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is part of an introduction to a much larger training workshop around communication skills. And I just thought I'd ask you, are there any Strictly fans in the room? Anybody prepared to admit you like Strictly? I love Strictly. I like it so much. Recently I went with my wife for some dancing lessons. That's one of the scariest things I've ever done, because for years I said, I have two left feet, I can't dance, like a lot of men. And you go to some lessons, and in an hour we learn some quick step, we learn some waltz, they do some jive at us, rumba, salsa. My head was blown. And that's just me trying to learn the steps on my own. When you try and do it with somebody else, a partner, that puts a whole new complexity on it. And then you've got to learn to dance with other people in the room. That's another layer of complexity. And I thought, this is about like learning how to communicate. Because communicating on your own is a bit of a lonely experience. You've got to communicate with other people, one-to-one or one-to-many in the room. And being able to do that effectively is a real challenge. It's one of these things we take for granted. But actually, I think as George Bernard Shaw said, the most dangerous thing about communication is the illusion that it has taken place. So in this workshop, we're going to be covering a whole range of things over the course of the day. We're going to cover body language and non-verbal communication. We're going to cover charisma and status. We're going to cover structure and delivery of that communication and those messages. But before we do any of that, there's one critical piece we need to cover in the next 2 or 3 minutes. It's a piece that is so obvious that you're probably thinking, well, duh, don't we know this already? But ask yourself, do you actually put it into practice? What I'm talking about is setting an outcome for our communication. Whether it's a presentation, whether it's a sales pitch, whether it's a phone call, maybe even an email. Do we sit down and ask ourselves, what's the purpose of this communication? In fact, specifically, do we ask ourselves, what do we want our audience to do as a result of this communication? A couple of weeks ago, I was coaching a couple of senior directors for an insurance company. And we'd gone through some stuff around delivery and things. And I said to them, what's the purpose of your communication to your other board members? What results do you want as a result of that? What do you want your audience to do? The response I got was, sorry, come again? And I was shocked. I thought, here are two senior directors, and a simple enough question to me, what's the purpose of the communication? So I said, well, what do you want your board members to do as a result of your presentation to the board? And they looked at each other and, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. What their objective seemed to be was to survive whatever slot they had, to perhaps look good, to not make a mistake or make a mess of themselves. They'd never thought about what was the purpose of it. And I said to them as a challenge, I said, well, if you don't want the audience to do anything as a result of this presentation, why bother make the presentation? Because surely most of what we're doing is we're trying to persuade, influence, and communicate with other people to get them to do things. Whether it's approve a budget, buy a product, change their behaviours in a training situation, whatever it is, there is always some action. So why is that such an important thing? Well, if you think about it this way, our brains, there are two, if you like, there's two parts to our psyche, if you like. There's our conscious mind and our unconscious mind. Probably heard that analogy, simplification. Our conscious mind is like a computer programmer. Our unconscious mind is like a computer, it's the brain. It can do millions of operations at once, but it can only be as good as the program that's put into it. And the conscious mind, what we focus on, our outcome, I would argue, is the program. It's the situation like that. Take computers to a slightly more different level, a bit more familiar level. How many in the room have a sat-nav? GPS system of some sort, yeah? Pretty useful tool, most of the time. Not infallible. It can take you up little odd alleys sometimes, but really useful tool. A friend of mine got a sat-nav. After a couple of weeks I said, how do you get on with it? He says, useless, I'm going to take it back, waste of time. I said, what do you mean? So I'll plug it in the car, switch it on, drive around. Doesn't tell me anything, just shows me a map of where I am. I said, you do put the destination in, don't you? He went, oh, I didn't realise that. The sat-nav is completely useless unless you put a destination in. It doesn't question the destination. It doesn't say, are you sure you want to go there? It just says, okay, you give me a destination, I'll find a way there. I'll find you the best route there. So if you're preparing a communication, if your brain is the sat-nav, if you know where you're aiming to get to, then your unconscious mind and all the intelligence and the learning that you've learned can help you plan a course to get there. Planning your presentation or your sales pitch. But what about when you're in the flow? You're there in front of a client, in front of an audience, and something goes wrong. You just get, somebody objects to what you're saying, or you see the eyes going a bit glazed, or they've been leaning forward, nodding, and suddenly, and you think, I've hit a roadblock. To use the sat-nav analogy, the sat-nav, you can say, find alternative routes, and it'll go away and it'll calculate and it'll find you a route there. Assuming you know where the destination is, of course. If the destination isn't there, it can't find you an alternative. Just the same way, if you're really clear about where you want your communication to go and where you want to get the audience to, what they want to be doing and thinking and feeling, you can adjust on the fly. Should you hit an objection? Should you hit a roadblock? So, yes, we will be talking about body language. Yes, we'll be talking about vocal variety. Yes, we'll be talking about structure and content and metaphors and analogies and persuasive language. But at the end of the day, if you're not clear about where you're going or what you want your audience to be doing, all that stuff is wasted, it's useless. As I said, it's one of the most obvious things you might think about. But how many of us actually do it? How many of us, when we're in the habit pattern, we do our old thing, oh, it's in front of a client, I'll rattle off my usual spiel or whatever. Do you really think about it, making it clear? Where am I trying to get to? What do I want them to be doing? If you can get that clear, the rest of it, I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's a hell of a lot easier than if you don't know where you're trying to get to. So if you take one thing away from today, it's you just think of the sat-nav and think, what's my destination? Thank you very much.